I was born in a town called Nitra in Slovakia, part of Czechoslovakia,
When were you born?
1929. My parents, Alehem HaShalom, had a grocery store, and the children, we had a family of 5 children. We were 3 boys and 2 girls. We had to help in the grocery store to our parents. For instance, we were selling milk, and this milk had to be carried to the customers, to their houses each morning. It was the job of the children, I was one of them, to carry these cans of milk to the customers, where the milk was poured over to the vessels of the customers, because such concept as we have in America, that you have everything bottled and easy, was not going on at that time. It was very, very hard to have proper dishes or containers to deliver stuff. Then we also carried out from the store wine each Thursday for Shabbat. That was also the job of the children, to carry those bottles of wine to the houses of the customers. Meanwhile, in the store itself, my parents, my father and my mother, Aleichem Shalom, were the ones who were selling the stuff, whatever, to the customers, and they made a nice living. And we had a very, very nice family life. The children went to yeshivot, and each holiday we celebrated at home. We went to shul. The town itself was about the size of Asbury Park, about 25,000 people, and there were about 4,000 Jews living there. Very, very nice Jewish life, especially the yeshivot. That was a very, very famous yeshiva in that city, into which other boys would come from surrounding areas to study under that. The rabbi was very famous, very great rabbi. His name was Rabbi Unger, Unger. He was very, very great and famous rabbi of Talmid Chacham, and he was a very, very unusual person. In fact, when he had to run away from home and he had to go to keep with the partisans. A partisan was a person that was fighting against the Germans. And there were such groups of people who got together and were fighting them. And this rabbi went to stay with the partisans. Unfortunately, he didn't eat anything non-kosher, and there was a big problem. There was not enough food, and unfortunately, because of that, he passed away right there among the partisans. When you ask if there was anti-Semitism, there was anti-Semitism since the beginning of history. There was constantly anti-Semitism. When we walked to school, then we had to run away very often from the Goyim. They would gather against us, beat us up, and constantly we had to be on the lookout that we should be able to get away from them. So anti-Semitism, there was constant anti-Semitism in not only in our town, but in the almost entire Europe, even before Hitler. So when Hitler came and he had to take care of getting the Jews together, he had a very easy time, because the Goyim who lived there, they were very, very anxious to help Hitler. So when you're asking me how much the Nazis affect us, actually they affected us even without being there, because they had such tremendous power that all these nations who were not really Germans, they were Slovaks, they were Hungarians, whoever belonged to that country, they were very, very anxious to help Hitler and take care of the horrible liquidation of entire Europe. So there was constant anti-Semitism, and we had to suffer for it. And we had some very few exceptions. For instance, at the end, when I'm going to describe how we had to get out from the bunker, from the place where we were hiding, and we knew that already we couldn't stay there anymore, my mother-in-law took my little sister, who was at that time 6 years old, to one of our customers, and she asked these people to please save her. And she was living with these non-Jews throughout the entire war. And she lived the war through by living by these non-Jews. So even though, as I said, there was anti-Semitism, but there were some who helped us. And this was one exception, where my sister was able to live in this family of non-Jews throughout the entire war that actually happened from 1944 till 1945. Hitler was a name that we heard about already much, much before it affected us. In fact, we had an uncle and aunt who had to escape from Austria and came to live with us for a while until they were able to emigrate to America. That was in 1940. So it was 2 years before Hitler came to us. Because Hitler came to us in 1942, and the first thing was that they announced that the young people between the ages of 16 and 25 should come to this place. Actually, it was a public school, and they're going to go to a labor camp. We didn't know anything about concentration camps. Everything was kept a secret. We only found out later. So we figured it's not such a terrible thing. If they have to go to a labor camp, eventually they're going to come back home. We didn't think too much of it. We were very ignorant. We didn't know what was going on. Only later did we find out. Once my brother, Allah Shalom, his name was Chaim, he was at that time 16 years old. He left from home. Never again did we see him. When first the Star of David came out, I remember all three of us boys, brothers, were walking to school when one of our teachers was coming opposite us, and he saw it and he started to laugh. It was funny. And we joined him in the laughter because it was very strange to us. There is such a thing as a yellow star. We didn't know how horrible it was. Actually, they were excluded from many places, and later on we realized that the reason that they made this law with the yellow star, that they could see a Jew from far, that he is a Jew, and very often we had to run away because they coming to beat us up. And very often this yellow star caused a lot of problems, as I described. And unfortunately, many Jews suffered a lot because of the yellow star. We were also part of it. Okay, so this question about hiding only occurred in later years. So let me put it into chronological order. 1942 was the beginning of these horrible times where they first took the young people and then they took everybody And in 1942, when we realized what's going on, most of us escaped to Hungary. Hungary, there was nothing going on yet, and all of our family went to our relatives to Hungary. How did we go there? We had to walk over fields that were plowed the entire night. About, I don't know, it was 20 miles maybe. And after we did that, of course, we had to have a person who was able to lead us. And a person like that had to be paid a lot of money. Now, let's say one family, like for instance, our family would be eligible to go to Hungary because we arranged already with our relatives. This person would come and he said, okay, I want $5,000. What happened if we didn't have $5,000? You know, in those years, dollars were worth much more than in America. $5,000 was like here $50,000. And if we didn't have it, then the word went out. The Blau family needs $5,000. In 15 minutes, we had the money. Everybody around the town gave freely. And that was beautiful. And it could be any family. And eventually, after the war, we paid it back. People who went to Israel, and I said, no, I gave $2,000 when they came collecting for you. And we sent back the money. And that was something that, you know, one of the things that was very, very nice that was happening. But that was the achdut, the unity of the Jewish people. When it came to money, people gave money. But when we went to our relatives in Hungary, we never saw these relatives before. There were people they know, and they didn't see us before, so we have to get introduced, and they had to place us. We couldn't live legally there. We had to be illegally there, which means I had to assume a different name, and I went to yeshiva. My name was different. I wasn't Blau anymore. I was a Rosenberg. And I stayed there until we were ready to come back. In 1944, the Germans started to collect the Hungarian Jews. Hungarian Jews were very proud. When we came to Hungary in 1942 and we told them, you know, Hitler can come here too, I am a Hungarian citizen, nothing could happen to me. They were so naive that it was painful. Unfortunately, they started to take the Hungarian Jews. Then we were ready to go back to Slovakia. And that's what happened. Back to Slovakia, again, over fields, again a lot of money, again other people had to pay for it. And we came back to Slovakia, but now we were smart already. Now we knew already that it's quiet for a while in Slovakia. It's not going to stay quiet. So my cousin and myself, we dug under our apartment a room. In that room, we had 9 people because we had another family that joined us. In that room, we stayed there for a few months until we had to get out. In that room, we stayed for a few months, and then people came over to take over the apartment above, so we couldn't stay there anymore. That was the time when my mother took my little sister to this non-Jewish family and asked them to keep her, and they promised they would. I was the only one who had papers that I'm not Jewish. No one else had such papers. It happened to be that I was a part of a group that was involved in making these special documents with a picture on it, that my name was a non-Jewish name, different. I had to get out. My parents had to get out. Unfortunately, my parents were being taken. And this is a story I want to tell you. This is an unbelievable story. Unfortunately, my father would be taken separately, the men were taken separately, and the ladies separately. So there was a transport of ladies where my mother, my sister, were in a train that was delivering cattle, not a regular train. And in that train, people had to sleep on the floor. Very, very bad situation. But they were given a certain amount of water. And people didn't know how long this water had to last them, whether it would be 2 days, 3 days, a week, or more. And this water was sort of a life for them. And when they were in that train, the little babies who were there started to cry. And my mother, Hashem, said, babies need water. Babies cannot live without water. We have to give them our water. Now, the lady got up and said, Mrs. Blau, do you realize what you are asking us to do? And besides this, these little children going to arrive to Auschwitz. You know what happens over there, little children? They're finished. We should give them our life, our water. What are you talking about? My mother said, we don't know where we are going. Maybe we are not going to Auschwitz. Maybe we're going to Theresienstadt. Theresienstadt was a model concentration camp which the Germans wanted to show off to the Red Cross. And the Red Cross came to check how the Germans are keeping the Jews. You see how nicely? And that was a model concentration camp. So my mother said, we don't know where we're going. Meanwhile, children have to live. She gave over her own water. She took away the water from my sister. She gave it to the babies. I don't know if there is a greater way of tzedakah than that was. And Baruch Hashem, they allowed to Theresienstadt. All these little children lived and they were liberated. Today they are grandmothers. That's a story not too many people would believe. Very good question. And we did have non-Jews who really kept us. And of course, the food that we received, the person cooked potato peels to make soup out of it. That's what kind of food we received. Pieces of bread until we had money. Once the money went out, the friendship stopped. And that's when we had to get out. And also the combination that the other people came to take over the apartment. That's when we had to get out. And that's when this happened, that my mother took my sister. And unfortunately, that's when my father was taken away, and my mother and my sister went to Theresienstadt. I went to a different city called Bratislava, or in other words, Pressburg, a very famous city where the Khatam Sofer lived, very famous. It was the capital city of Slovakia. I went there, that I shouldn't be recognized in my own city because people could see me, maybe they remember I was Jewish. So I went to this city and I went to work in a restaurant as a waiter. At that time I was about 15 years old and I was serving food to the Germans. I was serving them food. I felt like choking them, but couldn't do anything. And unfortunately, that was a situation where I was able to live myself, but I didn't know anyone from my family if they were alive or not. And this is such a situation that people cannot evaluate what that means. That I'm all by myself, living amongst Goyim, praying under my blanket, not knowing where any one of my family, we were 7 in our family, my immediate family, of course other members of our family, cousins, they were all gone. And this was very, very hard to bear. I want to tell you, a little example which maybe is going to be appreciated by my previous students. My students, when I was teaching here, and I was teaching the lower grades, and I was giving prizes, stars to the children. But then some of the children went and bought themselves stars from the store, and then I lost the track of all the stars. So I figured out something, and I was giving out spirals. Do you know spirals? You don't know what spirals is? I'm going to show you what a spiral is. Don't know if you're able to catch it.
Could be seen.
You get it?
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, I was doing it much better than this. So what was the significance of this? That when I was living as a non-Jew, and I knew where my sister was staying, and I wanted her to know that I'm alive, I couldn't write my name because then maybe the Germans catch it and I would be in trouble. And I couldn't write my non-Jewish name. I didn't want that either, that they should know. So I put a spiral next to my non-Jewish name. That's how my sister knew it's from me. It's a very unique situation, but there were many unique situations. One of your questions is if we were in danger. There were so many times that our life really was in tremendous danger. When we had to go and meet these leaders who led us across, I was sent by my uncle, my aunt, to meet one of those leaders because they didn't trust the leader. Maybe the leader will take your money and will disappear. So I was like the trial. I was to try them out if the leader is to be trusted. And I was supposed to meet him at a train station, a certain train station. And I came there, there's nobody there. Can you imagine? What am I going to do now? There's no one I can talk to. There is no one I can turn to. That's when the prayer really came handy. That's when I prayed very hard. And I was going out from the station, then I saw the people coming. They really had to meet me. And there were situations like this. Once it happened, they were still home. And we decided we're going to lock the gate. And we're not going to open it. The Germans are going to knock on it. And that's what we did. It was a very strong door, like more thicker than this. We locked it. And they were banging very hard, and screaming. And I was saying Tehillim. And my father always said, the way I said Tehillim saved us. They went away. That's one of the many other times. We were saved by such unbelievable situations that when you decided to go this way, you were saved, and you decided to go the other way, you would have been caught. Once you are caught, taken to a concentration camp, your life is only halfway sure. But even more than halfway, because most of the people who were taken did not come back. When the war was over, I was still in the restaurant, and really the army that liberated me were the Russians. The Russians were much closer to Slovakia than the Americans. The Americans came from the west, the Russians came from the east. So when I realized that the war is over, I wasn't really sure what's what. There were no trains, all the rails were all bombed out. The only way you can travel was on a horse and buggy. If you had not money, whiskey, vodka to give to the Russians. That was the only way they would take you. So we had to, I didn't say anything to the people that kept me in the restaurant, and I went back to my hometown. How did I go back? Through all these different ways. Okay? Now, for instance, for example, after the war, I had to go and pick up my uncle from a concentration camp that was near the Czech border. So I had to go and bring him on one of these wagons, and he was skin and bones. And when the wagon was shaking, it was hurting him every place. He says, please tell him to slow down. I said, the other people here think they want to go fast. He said, pay him more just. So can you imagine the hurt that he was receiving from the carriage because he was skin and bones. I had to give him extra money. People went over in a different carriage. That's just an example what trouble we went through even after the war. And then my mother, Shalom, had to keep him and bring him soup into the hospital every single day. It wasn't easy like here, you take your car and you go. She had to walk in the biggest heat to take it over to him. So that was already after the war. So after the war, we were waiting for the relatives to come back. Unfortunately, only my mother and my sister came back. I picked up my little sister from the non-Jewish people. And of course, we promised people we're going to send them packages. We sent them packages from here because if you took a package of cigarettes and sent it to Slovakia at that time, those cigarettes that you can buy here, you could have bought here for $50, were worth something like 500, maybe even 5,000. Cigarettes was like gold, especially American cigarettes. So we did send them all kinds of things as a reward for keeping my sister. If you ask me what problems I have, you see, it's something that's ingrained in you from the time you're little, this anti-Semitism. But I came here and I saw a policeman, I automatically went on the other side of the street because I was scared. A policeman. So that's a part of it, that you were constantly scared of the authorities. The authorities were against us. They all wanted to take us. So actually, my mother went to work, so did my sister, to send me to yeshiva. And I was going to yeshiva as soon as I arrived here. I was staying in yeshiva for 5 years. Torah Vodat, after I got smicha, I became a rabbi. And then I went and received a job. First, my first job was Cleveland, Ohio. A very, very big shul. And I was there as a chazan and a teacher. And after that, I came here to this place in 1957, 56. And I'm here still since that time. In Baruch Hashem, I had big siyata d'ishmaya. You know what that means? It means the help of Hashem. And through all of the tribulations that I went through, that was the only thing that kept me going. This tremendous belief that Hashem will help me. And that's what kept me alive. Baruch Hashem. I'm able to teach even today. I'm in my 80s. Not too many people can do it. But the fact that I have students coming back and tell me how much they remember, it's a very satisfying feeling. I'm constantly thankful to Hashem. That's my last statement. Because I realized without Hashem, I wouldn't be here.